"We can't allow that kind of element inside," the security guard announced, his voice echoing in the marble entryway. "This is an exclusive charitable event for the city's elite." His eyes narrowed at the small figure before him, a thin girl in a faded blue dress, clutching a handmade thank-you card. The contrast was jarring, a child wearing second-hand clothes standing before the glittering entrance of the Grand Athenaeum, where chandeliers worth more than most homes illuminated the wealthy as they helped the less fortunate. The irony hung heavy in the air. Inside, champagne flowed like water at the annual Bright Future Foundation Gala. Billionaires and celebrities mingled in designer formal wear, bidding astronomical sums for luxury vacations and art pieces. "Another 50,000 for the children," announced the auctioneer to polite applause. The organization's massive banner proclaimed, "Changing Young Lives." Outside, security tightened its perimeter, keeping reality at bay. In the shadows of a marble column, a man in a simple black suit observed the unfolding scene, his expression shifting from curiosity to something harder as the child's shoulders slumped in defeat. "But I just wanted to say thank you," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible, above the distant classical music. "They said they helped my orphanage." The security guard checked his list again, unmoved. "No children on the guest list, donors only." He gestured toward the street. "Please move along." Something in the marble lobby shifted then, a presence more than a movement. The man in the black suit stepped forward, his face now recognizable to anyone paying attention. As heads turned and whispers began, Keanu Reeves approached the entrance with purpose. What happened next would be shared thousands of times around the world, a lesson in what true charity really means. Lucy Morris had spent 3 hours getting ready for this moment. She had carefully washed her faded blue dress, the only nice one she owned, and asked Ms. Hendricks at the Bright Horizons Home for Children to help braid her hair. The orphanage director had been surprised when Lucy announced her plan to visit the gala. "But, sweetie, that's for the donors, not for us," she had explained gently. Lucy, however, was determined. She had worked for weeks on her thank-you card, adding pressed wildflowers from the orphanage's small garden and writing her best cursive inside. "They're helping us get new beds," she had explained, folding the card carefully into an envelope. "I want them to know what it means to us." The Bright Future Foundation had been plastering their advertisements all over the city for months, changing young lives, with photographs of smiling children. What the billboards didn't show were the actual children like Lucy, the ones living with 20 others in spaces designed for 10, sharing worn-out books and broken toys, waiting for the promised help that always seemed just out of reach. Tonight was supposed to be different. The foundation had announced a special fundraising drive for Lucy's orphanage, promising new facilities and educational programs. It had given Lucy and the other children something they'd almost forgotten how to feel: hope. The security guard, whose name tag read Jenkins, shifted uncomfortably under the stairs, now aimed in his direction. A few of the arriving guests had slowed their procession into the gala, watching the scene unfold with mild interest that hadn't yet evolved into concern. "Look, kid," Jenkins said, lowering his voice, "I don't make the rules. This event is invitation only, for security reasons." His eyes darted toward his supervisor across the lobby, who was watching with disapproval. Jenkins needed this job. The economy had been brutal lately. Inside, the auction had reached its zenith. "And next, a private island getaway, complete with staff and yacht access," announced the auctioneer, a silver-haired man whose voice carried the practiced warmth of professional charity events. "Opening bid starts at $100,000. Hands with diamond watches and platinum bracelets lifted in casual gestures, raising the price in $10,000 increments. A senator's wife smiled as she outbid a tech mogul. The auctioneer reminded everyone that this was all for the children. A waiter refilled champagne glasses as a staff photographer captured the moment for the Foundation's social media. Near the back of the room, Keanu Reeves had been listening politely to a film producer when his attention shifted toward the commotion at the entrance. The universe has its own sense of timing. Had Lucy arrived 10 minutes earlier or later, had Keanu chosen to use the private entrance offered to celebrities, their paths might never have crossed. But at this precise moment, as the little girl's eyes welled with tears and her small hand clutched her handmade card, Keanu was close enough to hear Jenkins say, "The people inside are very important. They don't need distractions from the very people they're trying to help." Something changed in Keanu's expression then, a subtle shift that those familiar with his films might recognize. It wasn't the cold focus of John Wick or the confused innocence of Ted Theodore Logan. It was something entirely genuine, a quiet, determined compassion. He excused himself from the conversation and moved with purpose toward the entrance, his movements drawing attention not because he sought it, but because of who he was. Conversation in the lobby quieted. Someone whispered, "Is that Keanu Reeves?" A socialite nudged her husband. A phone camera switched to record. Jenkins, still blocking Lucy's path, hadn't noticed the approaching celebrity until a respectful but firm hand touched his shoulder. Keanu had deliberately placed himself between the guard and the child, creating a small protective barrier with his body. The next words he spoke would turn a simple moment of kindness into something that would resonate far beyond the marble walls of the Grand Athenaeum. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice quiet, but carrying a weight that instantly commanded attention. The security guard's eyes widened in recognition, his posture straightening immediately. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't see you there. Can I help you, sir?" Jenkins asked, switching to the deferential tone reserved for VIPs. The transformation was immediate and telling. Keanu's eyes, however, remained focused not on the guard, but on Lucy, who stood frozen, her small fingers still clutching her handmade card. "I believe," Keanu said, gesturing toward Lucy, "that this young lady was trying to explain something important to you." His tone wasn't accusatory, but rather gently insistent. Around them a small crowd had begun to gather, guests arriving for the gala, staff members, and even a few photographers whose camera flashes created a strobe-like effect in the marble entryway. Lucy looked up at Keanu, recognition dawning slowly on her face. She had seen him before, on posters in the community room at the orphanage where donated TVs occasionally showed movies on weekend nights. You're the man from the movies," she said softly, momentary awe temporarily displacing her disappointment. Keanu smiled and knelt down to her level, an action that sent a ripple through the watching crowd. It wasn't just the physical act of a celebrity lowering himself to speak with a child. It was the genuine respect the gesture conveyed. "I am," he confirmed. "My name is Keanu. And you are?" "Lucy," she replied, her voice steadying. "Lucy Morris from Bright Horizons." Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we have strict instructions about unauthorized guests. The Foundation has security protocols that—" "I understand," Keanu interrupted, still maintaining his calm demeanor. "Security is important, but so is listening." He turned back to Lucy. "You were saying something about a thank you card?" The crowd around them had grown larger. Whispers rippled through the gathering. "That's Keanu Reeves. What's he doing? Who's the little girl?" Phones were raised discreetly and not so discreetly, capturing the unfolding scene. The Foundation's public relations director, a sharp-featured woman named Vivian Gray, emerged from inside, alerted by staff to the potential situation developing. She assessed the scene with practiced efficiency: celebrity, child, audience, cameras. Her professional instincts recognized both risk and opportunity. Lucy, emboldened by Keanu's attention, carefully extracted her card from the small purse she carried. "I made this," she explained, unfolding the handmade card decorated with pressed wildflowers, "to say thank you to the people who are helping our orphanage." Her voice grew slightly stronger. "We need new beds and books. Ms. Hendricks said people here are donating money to help us." Keanu accepted the card with both hands, examining it with genuine interest. "This is beautiful work, Lucy," he said, his fingers carefully tracing the outlined flowers. "You're quite an artist." Vivian Gray approached, her smile professional and calculating. "Mr. Reeves, what a pleasure to have you attend our gala. I see you've met—" She paused, glancing at Lucy with momentary confusion. "This is Lucy Morris," Keanu said, rising to his feet but keeping one hand gently on Lucy's shoulder. "She's from the Bright Horizons Home for Children, one of the beneficiaries of tonight's event. She came to personally thank the donors." Gray's smile flickered momentarily. "How thoughtful. However, I'm afraid we don't have accommodations for children tonight. The event is adults only, as specified in our invitations." Jenkins, seeing the public relations director take charge, stepped back slightly, relief evident on his face. The crowd, however, had continued to grow, with more guests pausing to watch the interaction. Among them were several prominent social media influencers whose presence at charity events was specifically cultivated for their follower counts. They were already streaming the encounter live, adding commentary, watching Keanu Reeves right now standing up for a little girl at the Bright Future Gala. The atmosphere in the lobby had shifted. What had begun as a minor security issue was evolving into something much more significant, a moment where the carefully constructed facade of charitable giving confronted the reality it claimed to serve. Keanu seemed to sense the importance of this intersection, though his focus remained on Lucy rather than the spectacle forming around them. "I understand there are rules," Keanu said to Gray, his voice still measured but firm. "But sometimes exceptions make sense. Lucy has come all this way to thank people who are raising money specifically for children like her. Doesn't it seem appropriate that at least one of those children should be welcomed?" The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. Around them, murmurs of agreement could be heard from the gathering crowd. A well-known fashion designer nodded emphatically. An aging rock star, himself a major philanthropist, moved closer to listen. Gray's professional smile remained fixed, but her eyes darted nervously to the phones recording the exchange. The situation was rapidly becoming a potential PR disaster, or opportunity, depending on how it was handled. Inside the main hall, the auction continued, but word was spreading about the scene in the lobby. Some guests were leaving their tables to investigate. "Perhaps," Gray began carefully, "we could make a special arrangement. A brief visit to thank the donors, chaperoned by staff, and then—" "Actually," Keanu interrupted gently, "I was thinking Lucy might be my guest tonight." He looked down at the girl with a warm smile. "Would you like to join me? I think the people inside should hear directly from you what their donations mean." Lucy's eyes widened, hope replacing the resignation that had begun to settle on her young features. "Really? I could go inside with you?" Gray opened her mouth to object, caught the expressions on the faces of the watching crowd, and recalculated. "Well, this is quite unprecedented, but given the special circumstances—" From inside the hall, the Foundation's director emerged, Charles Wingate III, old money and older connections, the type of man accustomed to controlling every situation. His tailored tuxedo and practiced smile couldn't quite mask his displeasure as he surveyed the scene. What he saw threatened the careful choreography of the evening, a celebrity, a child from the promotional materials, standing in real flesh and blood, and dozens of recording devices capturing it all. "What seems to be the issue here?" Wingate asked, his tone suggesting there shouldn't be one. The next few moments would determine whether the Bright Future Foundation's carefully curated image would be reinforced or revealed as the hollow performance it truly was. Charles Wingate III approached with the measured confidence of a man accustomed to deference. His eyes assessed the situation with cold efficiency, the celebrity, the child, the growing audience with their phones. A muscle twitched almost imperceptibly in his jaw. "Mr. Reeves," he said, extending his hand, "what an honor to have you attend our gala. I'm Charles Wingate, Executive Director of the Bright Future Foundation." Keanu shook the offered hand, but maintained his position beside Lucy. "Thank you for having me. I was just getting acquainted with Lucy here. She's from Bright Horizons, one of the orphanages benefiting from tonight's fundraiser." Wingate's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, of course. Bright Horizons is one of our many beneficiary partners." He glanced down at Lucy with the practiced warmth of a politician spotting a baby to kiss. "How wonderful that you've come to visit us, young lady, but I'm afraid this evening's events are not structured for children's attendance." The crowd had grown larger still. The marble lobby now held a mix of curious onlookers, wealthy donors, foundation staff, and service personnel who had paused their duties to watch. The tension was palpable, a collision between two worlds, two perspectives on what charity truly meant. "Lucy brought something to share with your donors," Keanu said, his voice quiet but carrying in the hushed space. He held up the handmade card with its carefully pressed flowers. "She wanted to personally thank the people who are helping her orphanage." Wingate's eyes flickered to the card, then to the recording phones, calculating. "How thoughtful. Perhaps we could have our media team take a quick photo, and then one of our staff can escort her." "Actually," Keanu interrupted, his tone remaining respectful but firm, "I think the donors inside might appreciate hearing directly from someone they're helping. It makes the work real, doesn't it?" The silence that followed felt weighted with significance. Around them, the assembled crowd seemed to collectively hold their breath. Wingate's expression hardened almost imperceptibly as he realized the situation was slipping beyond his control. This wasn't in the script, the carefully orchestrated evening where wealth performed compassion without confronting its object. "Mr. Reeves," Wingate said, lowering his voice to a confidential tone, "perhaps we could discuss this privately? Our program tonight is carefully timed with specific protocols for security and media. While we appreciate the sentiment—" "Is it about the dress?" Lucy suddenly asked, her small voice somehow cutting through the tension. Her fingers nervously smoothed the worn fabric of her blue dress. "Ms. Hendricks said it might not be fancy enough for a place like this." Something shifted in the atmosphere, a collective intake of breath from those close enough to hear. A well-dressed woman in the crowd pressed her hand to her mouth. A server with a tray of champagne flutes froze mid-step. Keanu knelt down again to Lucy's level, his action a deliberate choice that forced Wingate to either join him or tower above them both. "There's nothing wrong with your dress, Lucy," he said clearly, his words carrying to the recording phones. "It's beautiful." He rose and faced Wingate, who remained standing. "I'd like Lucy to be my guest tonight," Keanu stated, not as a question, but as a simple fact. "She represents why we're all here, doesn't she?" Wingate's professional composure wavered for just a moment, revealing the calculation beneath. The situation had evolved beyond a minor disruption into a potential defining moment, one that could either burnish or tarnish the Foundation's carefully cultivated image. Around them, the whispers had grown. "He's asking them to let the child in. That's the director blocking her. Isn't this event supposed to be for children like her?" "Of course," Wingate finally said, his smile stiffening. "The Bright Future Foundation has always prioritized the children we serve. If Mr. Reeves wishes to sponsor a young guest, we would be delighted." The pause before the final word spoke volumes. What happened next transformed the evening from a private charity event into a viral moment that would be shared hundreds of thousands of times across social media platforms. Keanu, with a gentleness that seemed entirely natural, offered his hand to Lucy. "Shall we go inside?" Lucy placed her small hand in his, nodding with wide-eyed wonder. As they stepped past Wingate toward the main hall, something unexpected occurred. One of the donors, a silver-haired woman in an elegant black dress, began to applaud. The sound was joined by another pair of hands, then another, until the marble lobby echoed with spontaneous applause. Inside the main hall, the auction had temporarily paused as word spread about the scene unfolding in the lobby. Curious donors stood from their tables as Keanu entered with Lucy by his side. The contrast was striking, the world-famous actor in his simple black suit walking alongside a child in her faded blue dress, surrounded by opulence meant to fund children exactly like her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Keanu said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "I hope you don't mind, but I've invited someone special to join us tonight. This is Lucy Morris from Bright Horizons Home for Children." He gently encouraged her to step forward. "Lucy has something she'd like to share with you all." Lucy looked around at the sea of unfamiliar faces, momentarily frozen by the attention. Then her eyes found Keanu's encouraging nod, and she reached into her small purse to pull out several more handmade cards, identical to the one she had shown earlier. "I made these to say thank you," she said, her voice small but clear in the hushed room. "Ms. Hendricks, she's our director, she told us that people here are helping us get new beds and books and maybe fix the leaky roof." Her confidence grew as she spoke. "Some of the little kids helped me pick the flowers from our garden. I pressed them myself." A woman at a nearby table wiped discreetly at her eyes. A tech billionaire known for his cutthroat business practices sat very still, his expression unreadable. At the back of the room, servers and staff watched with a different kind of attention than they normally brought to these events. Recognition, perhaps, of their own stories reflected in Lucy's presence. "Would anyone like one?" Lucy asked, holding up her handmade cards. For a moment, no one moved. Then the silver-haired woman who had started the applause earlier rose from her table and approached. "I would be honored," she said, accepting a card with both hands. She examined it closely, taking in the careful workmanship. "This is the most beautiful thing I've received in a very long time." One by one, others followed, billionaires and celebrities, politicians and influencers, approaching with unexpected humility to accept a child's handmade token of gratitude. The auction items, luxury vacations and designer goods, seemed suddenly hollow by comparison. What Lucy offered cost nothing but carried everything, genuine gratitude, unscripted and unfiltered. In the back of the room, Wingate watched with a complex expression, a man witnessing his carefully structured event transforming into something beyond his control. Beside him, Vivian Gray was already adapting, whispering urgently to the Foundation's social media manager, "Get this on our feeds immediately. Frame it as our planned highlight of the evening." But the moment had already escaped their management. The real-time videos being shared across platforms told a different story, one of barriers broken, of genuine connection between wealth and the reality it claimed to serve. And at the center of it all stood Keanu Reeves, not seeking attention, but rather deflecting it toward Lucy and the truth she represented. The remainder of the evening unfolded in a way no one had anticipated, least of all the event planners of the Bright Future Foundation. The carefully scripted auction resumed, but something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere of the grand hall. The amounts bid for luxury items soared beyond expected levels, with donors frequently glancing toward the table where Keanu sat with Lucy. She had been given the seat of honor beside him, her feet barely reaching the floor from the ornate chair clearly designed for adults. "And we have 200,000 for the private yacht experience," announced the auctioneer, his professional demeanor barely concealing his surprise at the unprecedented amounts. Do I hear 250? Three hands shot up simultaneously. By the end of the auction, the foundation had raised nearly triple their projected goal. Throughout the evening, Lucy became the unexpected center of gravity. Donors who had previously spoken of unfortunate children in abstract terms now engaged with a real child, asking about her favorite books and subjects in school. Many approached her table to personally deliver promises directly to her. "We'll make sure your orphanage gets those new beds by next month," promised a real estate magnate. "And proper heating for the winter," added his wife. The silver-haired woman who had first accepted Lucy's card introduced herself as Margaret Whitman, widow of a banking executive and longtime philanthropist. "I've been donating to children's causes for 20 years, she told Lucy, "but I don't think I've actually spoken to a child receiving help in at least 15 of those." The self-awareness in her voice suggested a revelation that would extend beyond this single evening. By midnight, Lucy had fallen asleep in her chair, the excitement of the evening finally overtaking her. Without hesitation or fanfare, Keanu gently lifted her in his arms. "I believe it's time to get her home," he said quietly to those nearby. Charles Wingate, who had spent most of the evening watching from a distance with a complex expression, stepped forward. "Our foundation car can take her back to bright horizons," he offered, his tone carefully neutral. "Thank you," Keanu replied, "but I'll see to it personally." The statement was simple, but left no room for discussion. As he carried the sleeping child toward the exit, the remaining guests parted silently, creating a path through the grand hall. No one pulled out phones to record this moment. Something in Keanu's protective posture seemed to command a respect beyond celebrity fascination. Outside, beneath the glow of street lamps, Keanu's driver brought the car around. Ms. Hendricks, who had been called earlier, waited anxiously on the sidewalk. Her eyes widened at the sight of a Hollywood star carrying one of her charges. "Mr. Reeves, I can't thank you enough for looking after her. Lucy is, well, she's special, always thinking of others." "She changed the room tonight," Keanu said simply, carefully transferring the sleeping child to her caretaker's arms. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, offering it to Ms. Hendricks. "My personal contact for anything the orphanage needs that doesn't come through after tonight." By morning, videos of the evening's events had spread across every major social media platform. Keanu and Lucy was trending globally. The unfiltered, genuine interaction between the actor and the orphan had struck a chord that transcended the usual celebrity news cycle. Comments poured in by the thousands. "This is what real charity looks like." When he knelt down to her level, "That's a man who gets it." "Is it about my dress?" Broke me completely. How many children feel they don't belong because of what they wear? 3 days later, as the viral moment might have begun to fade into the relentless cycle of online content, something unprecedented happened. The Bright Future Foundation, through its official channels, released a statement that sent shockwaves through the philanthropic community. Following the events of our recent gala, the Bright Future Foundation is announcing a fundamental restructuring of our approach to charitable work. Effective immediately, we are implementing a Voices First policy, ensuring that representatives from the communities we serve have places on our board and speaking roles at all events. Additionally, we are committing to transparency in fund allocation, with 90% of all donations directly reaching beneficiaries. Charles Wingate III, in an interview that suggested a genuine personal transformation, spoke with unusual candor. "For too long, we've allowed charity to become a performance, one that often serves the donors more than the recipients. Ms. Morris showed us the profound disconnect between our galas and the realities they're meant to address. Sometimes it takes a child to remind adults of what truly matters." At Bright Horizons, the changes were immediate and tangible. New beds arrived the following week. Construction crews began work on repairing the leaking roof. A library of new books filled previously empty shelves. But perhaps most significantly, Lucy and 3 other children were invited to join the Foundation's newly formed Youth Advisory Council, ensuring that young voices would inform decisions about programs meant to serve them. Keanu Reeves made no public statements about the evening. When asked by reporters at an unrelated film event, he simply redirected attention. "The story isn't about me, it's about Lucy and thousands of children like her who deserve to be seen and heard." His deflection of praise only reinforced the authenticity that had made the moment resonate so deeply. In the months that followed, the Keanu effect rippled through philanthropic circles across the country. Other foundations began inviting beneficiaries to galas not as performers or props, but as honored guests and speakers. The shift was subtle but profound, a rebalancing of the relationship between those with resources and those in need. As for Lucy Morris, she continued making her handmade cards, each one carrying pressed wildflowers from the orphanage garden. But now they reached grateful recipients across the country, many of whom had written to her after seeing the videos. On her bedroom wall hung a framed photograph, not of Keanu Reeves, the movie star, but of the man who had knelt to her level and seen her as a person worthy of respect. Beside it, written in her careful handwriting, was the lesson she had helped teach the world. Real kindness isn't for show.